What is up, guys? Credence K19 here, playing some Search and Destroy on Bakara. Search and Destroy, not my favorite playlist on Call of Duty, but the fact that I managed to go positive on this game is really surprising for me, so maybe you guys will enjoy it too. First things first, I'd like to say, as always, thank you guys for liking and viewing my other videos, giving me feedback and criticism. That all helps me out. Um, and so, today I'm here to take a departure from the theme of the last two videos, which was sort of just random, introducing myself, getting the initial views that I hold out of the way. And I'm going to talk about something more interesting than that. So, earlier, before spring break, my school did an interesting program. You know, schools, they always want to push, don't do drugs, don't have sex, all that. Well, they did an interesting program, and I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was an interesting take on it. It was called Ghost Day, and essentially what they did was they had a good couple hundred, there were about 1,500 students at my school. They got about a good 100, 250 students. And what they did was they made them wear these white shirts, and on it had their name on a tombstone. Underneath it says something like, "I was killed by a drunk driver. I was killed because I OD'd on shrooms," or some shit like that. And they couldn't talk all day. They couldn't participate in class. They had to sit at a specific part of the lunch table of the lunchroom. And at the end of the day, the last period of the day, they all left and they made a big announcement on the TVs. And they had everybody there. It was supposed to show some ratio of students that are killed by drugs and alcohol, and it was meant to say, if we apply that ratio here, this is how many people die from drugs and alcohol, and why you shouldn't do it, and how school would be affected. And knowing that I have very strong views on drugs, a lot of people, a couple of people actually, were talking to me that day. They were wondering what I thought about it. And so I thought I would put my thoughts on it on this video to sort of explain it to you. First things first is that I agree in that if you're going to do drugs, it's dangerous. There are certain risks about it that I personally don't want to take. That's why I don't do drugs. But at the same time, I can concede to the fact that there's a lot of distortion about alcohol and drugs and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that people make shit up about cocaine. That stuff's dangerous. But there's also, what annoys me is that people make the assumption that doing drugs is automatically abusing them, and I don't agree with that. I believe there is a strong difference between use and abuse of drugs. Now, before I go any further, I would like to say that I don't support anything that you can't grow in a field or distill from a plant. If it's not alcohol or marijuana or tobacco, and not the tobacco the cigarettes companies sell, because that shit's just messed up. If you want to roll your own tobacco, and I've seen it done, if you want to roll your own tobacco, I have no problem with that. If you want to smoke some marijuana, I have no problem with that. You want to drink a couple beers, I have no problem with that. And the problem that I have with a lot of the anti-drug stuff today is that they make barely any distinction between between stuff like marijuana and alcohol and tobacco and the really harmful stuff like cocaine and heroin. Cocaine, the synthetic drugs like that, PCP, cocaine, heroin, that stuff, it's chemicals. They're chemicals, and they're made to make you feel good at the expense of your body. And they're not really the original purpose of drugs in human society was to experience different points of view through the help of chemical interactions in our brain. And stuff like cocaine it's not for that. That purpose is just to make you high, and it messes you up in the process. So I don't purport, as I said earlier, anything you can't grow in a field or distill from a plant. I will say though that even then there are certain things about it that you should be careful about. Um, for example, we all know marijuana does have effects on the memory. So if it's something, if you're going to do it, you need to be well educated on what could happen to you or the risks that you're taking because of it. Now, a lot of people ask me whether or not like that I have a big problem. People say that, well, okay, so let's assume that you're taking marijuana and you pass out or something happens to you when you pass out and you die. Well, that's not a cause of the drug itself. People automatically assume in instances where somebody does drugs, if something happens to them, then it's the drug's fault. And it paints an unnecessarily negative picture of of substances in our society. People want to say, "Oh, well, this guy drank alcohol and went driving, then he crashed and died." All right. Well, it's not alcohol's fault that he was an idiot, got drunk and did some stupid shit on the road. Alcohol inherently isn't harmful. It's what happens when people abuse it. In fact, studies have shown, there have been a lot of German scientists actually that have been propping this up. It shows that if you drink a glass of wine a day, it's healthy for you. And that's the point of stuff like that. It's not to it's drugs aren't necessarily just to make you high. They're not these evil substances that are going to destroy your body. It's not something that who are ignorant or with small minds use. There's a there's a compound that is synthesized in our bodies called DMT, and it's a very simple molecule. Our bodies use it to sustain our cognitive processes while we're asleep, and that's why we have dreams. And the reason, for those of you who are wondering why dreams don't last very long and why they're so ephemeral and disconnected and you can never remember them afterwards, is because this compound breaks down in your body so quickly. Well, we started synthesizing it in the 1950s, and it's been used since then as a hallucinogen. There's very little, if any, effects on the body. It's mostly harmless, and for those of you who are wondering like what it does, go on Google and look up DMT art. What it does, there was a guy on, I think it was Dr. Phil or something like that, speaking about this drug. He had taken 500 milligrams, so he took a pretty big dose of DMT, and he went under, he was asleep. Now, he described the experience as having gained 1,000 years of human knowledge, as if he had been born and died and born again over the course of 1,000 years, and he had felt every single emotion humanly possible to be felt, and he had been under the influence of this drug for 15 minutes. And that's what we started. That's what humans started doing drugs for. Um, Everybody has heard of Greek oracles or West African prophecy people, whatever they call them. I don't know. And that's what those drugs were originally intended for. I read a book called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe in my English class, and there's a part of this book where there's a woman who was an oracle, and she was doing some stuff like in caves, and what oracles did in ancient Greece and ancient African mythologies, they would take natural substances. I'm not DMT, but things like that, certain plants, and they would take the influence that they had from those drugs. They would use and interpret them with real world circumstances to sort of try and interpret the will of their gods. It happens a lot in some of the more central African regions. There are a lot of plants in those forests, jungles. The Amazon is another place where that stuff is used often, and it's their drugs aren't. Not all drugs are evil substances trying to corrupt our bodies. Most of them, they're just ways to gain new viewpoints. And to answer the question I stated earlier, are drugs bad in many ways? Yes. Are they inherently bad? No. There's a difference between the use and abuse of drugs, and there really needs to be more focus on that. So that's the end of this video. Coming up, I'm going to be posting some regular games without commentary. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm running a little short on time. Queen is K19. Peace out.